Welcome to the training suite for the Joint Intersectoral Analysis Framework, or short, the JIAF. The JIAF is a multi-partner endeavor bringing together UN agencies, NGOs, and donors. The training suite consists of 3 elements: 4 high-level pre-recorded presentations of about 20 minutes, 8 more in-depth blended sessions of about 30 to 40 minutes, including exercises and additional technical workshops and webinars. The 4 high-level sessions provide a broad overview of the JIAF and an introduction to its concept, methodology, and process. The 8th in-depth blended sessions dive into more detail of the framework, the indicators and severity, aggregation and PIN. They look at the process in more detail in terms of coordination setup and look at the process step by step. They look at best practices from the JIAF 1.1 and provides an overview to intercluster coordinators, HPC focal points, and country cluster coordinators. This is presentation number 4 of the blended learning sessions. It looks at the coordination setup required to allow for a smooth JIAF process. This session covers key elements for a successful analysis process, how to develop a tailored work plan, and setting a realistic time frame. So let's start by looking at coordination arrangements. Usually in an HPC context, you will find a humanitarian country team, an intercluster coordination group, an information management working group, and maybe other working groups such as cache or access, and then you have the clusters and sectors. In order to help facilitate a JIAF process, you might want to consider also, and you might find potentially, the setting up of an analysis team that will do the heavy lifting. And at global level, there has been established a JIAF global help desk supported by the global clusters to help answer technical questions that one struggles to resolve at country level. The ultimate responsibility of an HPC process lies with the resident/humanitarian coordinator, the RCHC. As such, he or she is responsible for the HNO and its analysis. Now, cluster and sector coordinators also have a very important role to play. They are to participate in the JIAF process, appoint a clear focal point and an IMO if possible, share data, engage in joint analysis, develop their sectoral analysis, and help determine appropriate indicators for the people in need estimates aggregation. They are also responsible to explain the JIAF methodology to its cluster partners. As for local actors, while they may not have a formal responsibility, they are encouraged to engage in the process, share information and local expertise, and challenging findings. When it comes to OCHA's roles and responsibilities, OCHA is supposed to lead and support the process and ensure linkages between the analysis team, if set up, the ICCG and the HCT, and to ensure deliverables and deadlines are met. OCHA provides or leads the consultations on the analytical framework. It shares templates and guidance and provides technical support to calculate severity and intersectoral pin. OCHA also coordinates the intersectoral analysis and convenes workshops when required. Ultimately, it is responsible for drafting the intersectoral analysis results and produce the final document, usually the Humanitarian Needs Overview, the HNO. When it comes to the ICCG, the Intercluster Coordination Group, the ICCG is responsible and accountable for providing data, indicators, and other information to inform the intersectoral analysis. It is responsible and accountable for providing data, indicators, and other information to inform the analysis in each sector. It is also responsible and accountable for the review and agreement on the intersectoral analysis results, and to provide information and methodology of their calculation of the sectoral pins. Ultimately, it is responsible for the drafting of the sectoral analysis results. Now, what's the best way to set up an analysis team to do the heavy lifting of joint intersectoral analysis? It is recommended to appoint the team through existing coordination structures. Now, bear in mind, appointing a team is not mandatory, but recommended to do the legwork, the groundwork, the heavy lifting. For HNOs, the joint analysis is a intercluster coordination group / HCT humanitarian country team led process, supported by information manager offices from an information management working group where it's present. That is sort of the common setup. Should you consider establishing an analysis team, it is recommended that that fits into precisely such an existing structure. In fact, the analysis team can be formed from an existing information management or an assessment and analysis working group. Or this assessment analysis group could simply assume the role of the analysis team and maybe formalize it as a work stream or task, a subgroup within that. This analysis team or formalized workstream then conducts the intersectoral analysis on behalf of the humanitarian coordination structure and submit its results to the intercluster coordination group first. The HCT at a higher level will be consulted at a later stage. The intercluster coordination group or HCT might also discuss the results with a wider audience, be that the government, representatives of the affected communities, etc., and liaise additionally with subject matter experts or contextual experts as required. When putting together a team, it should be considered to diversify expertise, skills, and backgrounds as much as possible. The appointed team should ideally be multi-sectoral and gender balanced and include a clear lead analyst. Where possible, local actors should be invited to be part of the analysis team. So, now over to you before we go to the next part of the presentation. Absorbing the information from the first few slides, the question to you is, what are the existing coordination arrangements in your context, and how would you leverage existing mechanisms in your country to allow for a smooth analysis process? I suggest you pause the presentation, take 10 minutes to reflect on those questions, and when you're ready, we can continue with the presentation. So in the next step, let's look at the key steps of a standard process. We won't go into much detail as the session 5 of this series provides space to really go into more detail. This is just to give an overview. So the standard process, or the JIAF, recommends 5 steps. The first one is to plan and design a joint intersectoral analysis process. So it's some of those elements we looked at in the previous steps, to form an analysis team, fit in that within the existing coordination structures, set and agree on a time frame, on roles and responsibilities, etc. Step 2 is the collation and collection of the data, and the output of that is an initial intersectoral analysis narrative. Step 3 is then really to consolidate all the JIAF data and to come up with a preliminary pin based on this data. And then step 4, this is where one conducts the actual JIAF analysis. The output there is a more refined joint intersectoral analysis, a narrative, a more refined intersectoral pin, people in need figure, and projections looking ahead towards the planning horizon of this exercise. And then the process concludes with validating the analysis. This is where then the findings of the JIAF are ready to be transformed, and in most cases then will be informing the H&O. So these 5 key steps of a JIAF process, these can be basically used to develop a work plan. Here you see a sample work plan that details the 5 steps and then details in more detail the activities. This sample work plan is available and can be accessed, so you can use it and adapt it to your local context. So the question to you is to think about how you would design the process in your context and which elements of the standard work plan need to be tailored in your context and why. Pause the presentation and take maybe 10 minutes to reflect on these questions. When ready, continue with the presentation. So let's look at some dates. Here is a generic timeline, and if you look at below, highlighted is the 2nd November. This is when submissions are expected from countries and regional offices to inform the Global Humanitarian Overview. The Global Humanitarian Overview is based on the analysis developed in H&Os, and it is published late November, beginning of December, meaning that country inputs need to be received this year by latest 2nd of November. So walking back from there and keeping the program cycle in mind, it is recommended to start the analysis process in June. That's when, in most operations, the inception workshops start, where discussions evolve around setting the scope and the focus of the analysis, where the timelines are being agreed upon, where the roles and responsibilities are agreed upon. Also in June, there's a review and validation of the analysis framework and the JIAF work plan. And then right after, primary data collection starts. This might happen earlier or a little bit later, but it's certainly at this very beginning of the process where, after defining the scope of the analysis, where the primary data collection starts. Not only the primary data collection, but also the consolidation of existing information of secondary data. In July, again, this can be sooner or later. There are the first findings that are being presented and being discussed. In many operations, work starts on establishing the preliminary PIN in July, consolidating indicators, and estimating severities. In August, you might plan for a JIAF workshop or an H&O workshop to validate all those findings before entering into the next phase of the program cycle, the development of the HRP, the Humanitarian Response Plan. This is also the time where you might take your findings and engage with development partners and develop a common needs analysis. End August or beginning of September is also then the time to validate the findings at the ICCG/HET level, the Intercluster Coordination Group level, or at the Humanitarian Country Team level. This is also the time where the work earnestly starts on agreeing on the planning scenarios, on developing the HRP, refining the objectives, etc. There is still then some time to finalize the H&O. Clusters will be submitting their sectoral analysis to OCHA, which then consolidates everything into the H&O document. Ideally then, the H&O is finalized ahead or around the publication of the GHO, for the simple reason that when the GHO is out and is being published, there's high visibility, and this is the moment that maybe readers of the H&O and donors and other partners will want to dive into specific country elements or country plans and country H&O. So having them ready by late November is an ideal timeline. However, every context is different, and the whole process might also be delayed or is even faster than this generic timeline. We see many H&Os published late in the year, sometimes even in the new year, but ideally is to have something ready by the launch date of the GHO. To support you with agreeing on the timeline and the management of the process, there is also a generic Gantt chart available that already features the key steps and suggested timeline. It's just a matter of you downloading it and adapting it to your context. So, with this, we're coming to the end of this session. We looked at the key elements for a successful analysis process. We looked at how to develop a tailored work plan, and finally setting a realistic time frame. You can find more information and the resources used for these sessions under the following links. Many thanks for your attention.